future is bright, especially if we build for it. Welcome to Architecting the Future, a podcast for the builders of tomorrow, all about people, process, and technology. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Architecting the Future. I am really excited today to have Chad Smykay, who's one of the field CTOs at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Chad, thank you so much for stopping by the show.
Yeah, thank you, Miles. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking to you and talking about what's going on in technology today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw we're obviously both ex-EMC prior to the merger with Dell. And now you're at HPE. So I was excited about that connection because you spent a lot of time architecting some of the, what's now the backbone of the industry in terms of cloud at Rackspace and modern data appliances. So I thought maybe we could, before we get into your journey, just start by you introducing yourself and what you actually do as a field CTO at Hewlett-Packard.
Yeah, great. So Chad Smykay, I'm a field CTO and distinguished technologist here at HPE. And basically what that means for all the Americas, so North America and South America, I talk to all of our different customers on their technology challenges, primarily focused on still the big data, right? That's still around, that's still going, as well as machine learning to help implement AI concepts into somebody's business. So that's where I focus my time with most of our customers. And I see customers from energy to fintech to ad tech, just all kinds of customers out there doing great things with data.
And I have to ask you, so when you hear these buzzwords like AI, big data, machine learning, those buzzwords existed when I was at EMC in 2015. I think they probably existed in 2005. But it feels like a lot of organizations are struggling and have historically struggled to actually realize much beyond getting budget and putting a little PDF together on the value of all this stuff. Can you just talk me through the evolution of, back in your Rackspace days to today and how you're actually seeing, the practical implementations going around some of these technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we start back when I was at Rackspace, that's actually where I got a lot of my operational experiences at Rackspace Managed Hosting. I think now it's just Rackspace for short, right? We got to shorten things so everybody can remember them. But during the initial kind of cloud wars, it was all about what can you automate. So can you use any machine learning concepts or possibly even RPA out there, right? Before that was a cool term, right? To do any kind of automation. And there are some we were able to do, right? Especially when it comes to kind of monitoring and reporting and figuring out what the customer's uses are. And I think that's where a lot of the cloud providers have been, right? It's stuff behind the scenes you don't see, your billing, your usage. I mean, that stuff that there is definitely some machine learning there in use, but you don't see it, right? So that's kind of what we call AI in, where there's some AI built in, right, to some tool that you're using that you don't even know about. So that's one good example. And now with the AI hype, I honestly think we're in the AI wars, right? Similar to the cloud wars where you had all these big mega companies building these cloud platforms. And that's where we are in AI now is how can you monetize it? How can you implement as simply as possible, right? And then how can you have it affect that business use case, whether it's, making money or saving money to, for your business. So I think that's where we are right now. And you got to start somewhere with that, right? You got to start by having the data. So I think that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and it does make me want to ask you, just, the data really makes the model. So you see these tools like Data Robot that are pretty cool for just models on demand from some genius data scientist that you can plug into. But without an effectively structured data warehouse, they're pretty much useless. Would you say organizations are struggling more with wrangling their data or actually coming up with imaginative ways to use that data?
Both. So it's definitely both, but definitely the first challenge is wrangling the data. So similar to what we had in the big data days, which was all about Hadoop, was kind of wrangling all this data in one spot. You still had to have, good data. It had to be labeled properly. Did you even have the data for that use case? So a good example I have, I was actually out at our customer conference this summer here called HPE Discovers in Las Vegas, and we were doing this live healthcare demo. And the healthcare demo was all about X-ray images. There's a machine learning model where we built out a model based on can we detect a particular disease based on your X-ray of your lungs. And this guy came up, he was in the healthcare, and his business, he's like, oh, we want to start doing this. We want to offer this as a service. And I said, well, what do you do? And they actually, in hospitals, they do a lot of the scanning in and scanning out of all the equipment. So, needles or any kind of equipment, right? Scalpels, what have you. And I said, well, this is a perfect example where I had to tell them, you have that data, right? Do you have any X-ray data? No, you don't have any X-ray data, right? You're not in this business case. Why don't you go create predictive models where you can offer it back to your customers, which should be like the hospitals, right, or the healthcare providers, and say, hey, we know you're going to run out of these things, right, based on what we've built, and say you should order 20 more of these or 100 more of these or whatever, or save them some money and say, hey, we noticed you guys, by around this time you don't use as many, so don't order this much, right? So you'll provide that value-add service. And so that was a good example of, one, what data do you have, and two, do you have a use case? And I just made that up for him right there on the spot, right? It was like, why don't you go attack that use case? So the whole point is if you got the data, you got to be able to connect the use case. If you don't have the data, right, you can't make that use case.
And what starts the process? Should it start with a business user saying, hey, I have this vision, can you help me collect the data? Or does it start with IT saying, hey, we have this data, do you want it? Or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. So the biggest success we have is you start small. This is just like we did in the big data days. So we're back to AI, the high school of having the sex talk where everybody says they're doing it, but they're really not, right? Same thing with the big data days. We're talking about it in AI. But you have to have a couple defined use case and start small, right? This is where we had our successes over the years with so many customers that we have from the big data space that's now transitioning to more large language model development in the AI model management space. But you got to start small, start with 1 or 2 use cases. Don't go out there and say, we've got these 10 different things you want to do, because you have to get those successes in the business. And that typically comes from the business side to say, hey, we think we can do this, or we want to do this. And the IT side can say, yes, we have this data, or we don't, to serve up this use case.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because is there an element of people see their competitors kind of doing some fluff marketing, and then they feel like they have to go all in to keep up, and it's all just like you said, kind of people outdoing each other with fake initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going on a lot. I mean, it's not just happening in big orgs, but you see it in the startups as well, right? They have whatever.ai, and if you actually drill into what you're doing, you're like, oh, you're just providing kind of some simple BI dashboard analytics here. Like, what is it that's really machine learning driven, right? What is it that's taking the task off the table, or that's doing something to help me, again, make more money or prescribe something for the future? So yeah, you've got to really look at, even if you're a organization, you got to do your due diligence and really, if you're going to use some kind of software product or some cloud-based products, make sure there's some due diligence around what is the actual AI, right? If you are buying something off the shelf.
And when you talk about use cases, obviously as a field CTO, you're meeting with leaders all day long. Are there a couple of use cases that are maybe even span multiple industries of, like, if you were looking for a quick early win, like, start here?
Yeah, anything having to save money is always a good use case, right? Trying to make money, meaning I'm going to go out and make more money or make new money on something, on a business, is just a lot harder to prove out. So definitely start with those where you can save money. And those can be just some kind of logistics operation. Logistics can span from, I'm buying software or the hardware, to I'm buying the parts or some kind of material, right? If I'm in the energy space, right? I'm maintaining an oil and gas pipeline, to I'm maintaining software. So my recommendation is start with 1 or 2 use cases that are all about saving the money, because chances are you already have the data and everyone already has it built into their business model that they're spending some money on this thing, right, on what those logistics are. And so if you can go show that you can save money either when you buy it, right, how you buy it, how much you buy it, is very useful to the business.
That's and so, like you said, a lot of the attention is going towards new business models, new digital platforms, whatever, and that's actually not really where most of the money to justify these initiatives is. It's in this, where money's already flowing, doing it better.
It is, but typically in those organizations, they've already done what I just talked about, which is they've already done some initiative, prove out that they have the IT expertise, they have the data, or they have the teams to go build out those new initiatives. So the point of this conversation we're having is if you're starting somewhere new, try and go into the saving money route, right? If you already have some kind of AI or ML practice inside your organization, even if it's young, that's okay, right? Then you can go after the new money making side of the business.
Yeah. And I have to ask you, so you're obviously at one of the largest infrastructure companies in the world in terms of just how many servers and storage and cloud you guys ship every day. And I know that there's still a large argument there of public cloud, private cloud, hybrid, co-locate, all the way back to your Rackspace days. That's never really stopped, like you said, the cloud wars. But then there's this whole other thing of the layer of how applications and software and models are used that has nothing to do with the physical storage of it, whether it's cloud or not. So I'm curious, if you were a CTO or CIO, how do you balance focusing on back-end infrastructure, which has traditionally been the main job of the CIO for the last 50 years, to now focusing on these, how we integrate ChatGPT into our user base, or because it seems like the world's moving fast and you could maybe fall to one side or the other. I'm just curious how you think about it.
Yeah, I'll answer that where I've seen the most success with CIOs or CTOs and organizations where they basically outsource what is not important to their business, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you outsource all of your IT, but if you're not in the business of making hardware or maintaining this hardware or, of course, maintaining a data center, then you got to get out of that business, right? This is why people aren't in the data center business anymore. They lease those things, that's one of the differentiations we have in HPE. We have something called HPE GreenLake, where you can manage your resources just like a public cloud provider, meaning it's all consumption based in your data center and a colo somewhere else, which drastically cuts the costs, right? And we're seeing that right now. There's a lot of what we call repatriation of workloads, where things are coming back from the cloud. Cloud's here to stay, right? It's got great agility. It's got a great places to get started. In fact, I would say that's probably a good place to start AI or ML use cases, right? But that may not be the best place to run them in the long term, because that can cost you, possibly even more if they're long-term running workloads. It's typically where we see the highest costs, right, in the public cloud providers. So, that's something that HPE brings to the table, where we continue to have had and have customers coming over, right, to where they want to manage it like a cloud experience. They don't own the hardware. They don't necessarily even own the data center, where they just worry about their workloads and their applications that are running.
Yeah,
so that's where you get, the biggest benefit is you got to go into the business thinking now, okay, that stuff, almost like storage was a commodity or has become a commodity now. You got to think of data center and even resources in the data center as a commodity now, and you need to use it that way and not go try and specialize on it, right?
And really, in theory, if you partner with someone like Hewlett-Packard to do that well, in theory, you're then freed up to focus more on these things like what do you do with all the ones and zeros stored in that machine?
Exactly. Yep. You drove my point home perfectly.
Yeah. And how do you guys partner with companies for that new, more sexy part of the two? What are you guys doing around AI, ML, at actual product and service level?
Yeah, so we've got multiple services out there. We've got something from our HPE services called DNA, where it's all about looking at your organization and mapping out those business use cases to the data you have, specifically when it comes to trying to do something with big data or machine learning. We can do that in other parts of IT as well, like how to figure out a better monitoring strategy or observability, for example. But I'm talking more specifically about the ML AI journey, but we have that. And then, of course, we've got software systems that can actually manage these resources and manage these resources for the people in your organization, like your data scientists, your data engineers. There's several things there from our HPE Emerald portfolio, as well as our HPC and AI group. So lots of different, people don't realize HPE thinks we're just servers, right? But we're a cloud provider as well as a software provider as well, to not only provide these services, but the software to run it.
Yes, it's pretty amazing the span that you guys can cover, just across so many pieces. And a question I have for you is, where do you see this going? I mean, there's so much theory about AI replacing jobs or augmenting jobs, what's the workplace of the future, in 20 or 30 years going to look like? how data driven will we be? How much manual work will there be? Like, I feel like you're one of the uniquely positioned people to answer that, just because you're so close to where it is today.
Yeah, there's two things that I see, because I see a lot of the different industries. The kind of construction industry, if you will, they're here to stay. I think if they're going to use MLAI, it'll be again to take back office administrative tasks off the table, and that's what we'll continue to see across all businesses. So, data's, I don't even think you'll see the data, right? So the futures are, you're going to have AI meaning there's going to be AI features built in to all the different software tools that you use in your organization, and you won't even see it. It's going to be doing things, recommending things, right, that you don't even realize it's going to be working for you. And it's not going to eliminate jobs. It's going to eliminate certain tasks people are going to do in jobs, which means, yes, you'll probably have less people, right, doing a particular job than you did before 5-10 years ago. And especially it won't affect the creatives. So anybody that's doing any kind of creative work, not going to affect them at all.
Even with the generative AI stuff, you don't see it as really getting into high-end creative anytime soon.
It is. It looks like it is right now, but in order for those models to be trained, it still has to go out and look at art, right? If you're talking about generative AI when it comes to like kind of artwork, right, generating a picture. So if nobody's creating that, there's no new, people out there in the market creating any new content, then those models will essentially become stale in a couple of years. So it just won't work.
And now another question that I have is, when you think about models, so you have data, so you have a company like HP that has amazing amounts of data compared to the average small business. I would think at some point HPE would say, we should build our own models, train our own models. Like we don't want to just use like ChatGPT or Bard, either because we don't want to give them our data, number one, which is a big concern, or number two, because that, like you said, the mash of data is so randomized and not specialized. And is the competitive advantage in training AI models in the data you feed them? Is it in how the architects that are training them? Is there generally just more the merrier? Like, how do you think about competitive advantage in model creation and using these things?
Yeah. I mean, your competitive advantage is always where you specialize in the market, and so you've got to apply that to when you're working with a model. I'll also say, though, there's so many great new concepts, whether it's a large language model or just specific models out there, whether they're CNNs or DNNs created for a specific task. Think of like in the healthcare, there's actually really good open source models to figure out handwritten notes for doctors and nurses, right? It can figure out what the note is, right, that somebody put on a document if it was scanned via OCR, or we don't have a lot of that anymore because now everything's pretty much digitally started digitally first, right, in healthcare systems. But that's a good use case where those models are now kind of pre-trained. Your differentiation is what can you put on top of that model. So it's more of what can you do for inferencing on it. So, one of the things I see happening, and I'm already seeing happen, customers are saying, what's out there right now for a model that's pre-trained that I can start using and eliminate 80%, 90% of that training work, but I can improve on that model based on my data, right, to help out my customers, my business, or my use case.
So yeah, it's a little bit of both.
It is, and HPE has initiatives today in our CTO where we have multiple different initiatives to use models, specific models, or of course large language models within our business. I'm actually working on a broader project that's more public facing. It's something that we're going to start calling AI for Good, where we're going to have kind of open source programs, models, the data itself. One of them that we're starting on is something we're called BAI. I know it's not very creative, but that's what we came up with internally, where we have real beehives, so real beehives at our headquarters in Houston and Spring, Texas, here at HPE. And we're taking in sensor data from those hives, and we're going to try and predict brooding, and when's the queen there, or when will the queen be there. And eventually we're going to get into acoustics with it. We're going to add acoustic sensors so you can figure out diseases. We're going to add more cameras inside the hive so we can figure out if there's mites in them, if they're infected. So all kinds of really cool use cases, and the plan is to make that publicly available for other folks, right? Not just the data, but the program, how we put it together, how it's being managed. So you could take that almost as a standard, blueprint and apply it really to any kind of industry or business model when it comes to working with data, the models, and the program itself. So that's something that's a little more broader, kind of, again, we're calling it AI for good, help out everyone in the world, but we of course have our own initiatives inside where we're going to be using models and LLMs to improve our business inside HPE.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, how do you keep up on all this stuff? Is it podcasts? Is it books? Is it peer conversations? I feel like you ingest a lot of
books are too slow. I love books. Books are good of more of like, what's changing in models and how can we train them faster? But honestly, podcasts are the only way to keep up with stuff at the speed of light these days. So yeah, podcasts, there's several out there. Now I'm going to forget all the names, right, while we're live. Yeah, there's several out there that I keep up with.
Yeah,
But podcast is definitely the best way to stay up to date in the technology industry, because books are more of a, how can I do something with that knowledge and apply it maybe at a technical level, right, in my opinion, and then how can you keep up with what's going on the business side with these newer concepts to apply at a technical level.
Yeah, that was a good point. The speed at which it's moving, books probably become outdated in like 6 months. So by the time they printed it, the models change. And now if anyone wants to reach out to you, just learn about HPE, get a sense for, some of this stuff, is just your LinkedIn okay, or what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best. I'm on there all the time. Definitely recommend that. Message me, ping me on a post there, whatever works best, but that's the best way, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Chad, thank you so much for...
I don't mind giving out my email, but if I give out my email, then I won't be able to keep up with emails. So let the social media platforms work for you, right?
I hear you. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining our show today. We really, really appreciate it. Look forward to having you back on again soon.
All right. Thanks, Miles. Appreciate it.